Abortion is a greater evil than taxes.
America is ready for another revolution.
Now, as promised, a special comment on the madness of the Tea Party and the elections of next Tuesday. It is as if a group of moderately talented performers has walked on stage at a comedy club on improv night. Each hears a shout from the audience consisting of a bizarre, but just barely plausible fear or hatred or neurosis or prejudice. And the entertainment of the evening is for each to take their thin, absurd premise and build upon it a campaign for governor or congressman or senator. The problem is, of course, when it turns out that there is no audience shouting out gags, just a cabal of corporations and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and political insider bloodsuckers like Karl Rove and Dick Armey and the Chicken Little chorus of Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck. And the instructions are not to improvise a comedy sketch, but to elect a group of unqualified, unstable individuals who will do what they are told in exchange for money and power and march this nation as far backward as they can get. Backward to Jim Crow, or backward to the breadlines of the 30s, or backward to hanging union organizers, or backward to the trusts and the robber barons. Result? The Tea Party.
Good morning, listeners. This is Sam O'Driscoll.
And this is Chris White.
And you're listening to Sam and Chris live at Lau. So, there's been a lot of political talk in the news lately with this whole election thing. You interested in any of that?
I care a little bit about it. I do live in the United States, so.
True. I heard you were out in the field doing some research on, what was it exactly?
I have been. I've actually been looking at grassroots movements in the United States recently.
Kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Specifically, the Tea Party, just because of the amount of Tea Party candidates running for president. And
True.
I've been looking specifically into if the Tea Party is positive or negatively affecting the Republican Party. And I decided to look at the positive side because obviously, you know, those are my people. And so I actually know a guy in the movement who's important. He goes by the name of Colonel West.
I hear he's a big deal.
He's a big deal, kind of.
Wow.
And yeah, so I had a great interview with him, learned a lot, asked a lot of good questions, and was able to gather some great info that the listeners can listen on to later in the video. So.
Well, as a matter of fact, I've actually looked into some of the negative effects.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that is right. And as you'll see, we kind of get into whether or not the Tea Party is representing the people or if it's a separate interest group. It's all very fascinating stuff.
Sure.
I actually have my own friend, Rachel Blom, who I interviewed to talk about the overall effect the Tea Party has on the political landscape.
PhD candidate, right?
Yeah, PhD candidate at Georgetown, actually. So just over yonder.
Yeah.
But yes, the grassroots movement is very exciting stuff, and I wonder, do you think it could be a viable option for the future of the U.S. political system?
You know, that's the million-dollar question we will get to later in the show.
All right, listeners, stay tuned to find out. Our grassroots movement the future?
We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, I think the thing that you have to come to understand, you know, everyone likes to call it the Tea Party, but really, I like to look at it from a principle basis. It's a constitutional conservative grassroots movement. So it really is an economics-based and individual liberty-based movement, and I think that that's why they garnered a lot of attention. And the easiest answer as far as how has it affected the Republican Party in the last decade is the reason why they have a majority in the House and the Senate. And I think
The chart shown depicts outcomes for House candidates during the 2014 elections. Provided by Brookings, it demonstrates that the Tea Party still enjoyed success during the 2014 elections and was not merely fizzling out after a successful 2010 run.
So overall, you think the effect has been positive for the Republican Party then?
I think that when you look at the fact that the Republican Party has been able to earn a majority in the House and the Senate, it is the largest majority that they have had post-World War II. Absolutely. If anything, it has really energized a lot of everyday Americans at the grassroots level, and I think that's a great thing to once again have the American people engaged and involved in electoral politics.
This Gallup research poll shows an increase in thought, motivation, and enthusiasm of Republican-leaning voters between the 2006 and 2010 midterm elections. Clearly, some force or political movement has prompted Republican voters to turn out in larger numbers than in previous elections.
I think in the past, most of your grassroots movements have been on the progressive socialist side, the left side. So it's a very interesting political dynamic. You see in this current presidential election cycle, the out of the mainstream, the out of the norm candidates are doing very well. Because I would assess that the special interests and the unions still control the grassroots movement on the left, whereby it is a very organic and genuine movement on the right.
Will there continue to be pushback within the party against people like Ted Cruz, yourself?
Well, I think the future is that the established political class they're losing their control, they're losing their power, and again, you see that playing out in the 2016 presidential election cycle. So I believe that you're going to continue to see more of an influence with principle-based grassroots movements, such as the Tea Party movement.
How do you think the Tea Party has affected the Republican Party in the last decade?
It's done two things, and one is push the Republicans further to the right in terms of their platform, and then the other is to present a consistent primary threat to the Republican Party.
Okay. And do you think the effect the Tea Party has had in the recent years has been a positive or negative effect?
So in order to say something's positive or negative, we need to figure out what we think is good or bad in politics. So if you think that more voice for different kinds of factions is good, then it's positive, because in the U.S. system we don't have a lot of room for third parties. So there is no place for a far-right movement unless they become kind of a raucous party faction. But if you think consensus is important, then it's probably militated against that. So in that sense, it's been negative. It depends what's important to you.
Okay. But why do you think there's so much pushback in the establishment against the Tea Party?
There certainly is pushback, and I think it's because one of the Tea Party's main strategies is primarying the Republican Party. So in previous conservative movements like the Christian right, there's a faction within the Republican Party, but they work within it, and they can actually provide a voting base that helps Republicans get elected. So the Republican Party was okay taking on, the school prayer in school or trying to overturn Roe versus Wade types of policy demands. But the Tea Party hasn't tried to make a deal with them. They seem to have demonstrated that they would rather see Republicans lose a seat than be strategic. So frequently they'll primary, and just kind of a further right person will win the Republican seat, and then they lose to a Democrat. And it's just, it's bad business for the party. We tend to have one of two things happen. One is we could just have this party faction system. So the Republican Party has had lots of times where there's been kind of a business conservative aspect, and then something else that's a little bit more fringe, and then it kind of fights it out and has a period of moderation, and then there's another thing. You see this in the Democratic Party as well. The other possibility is complete party realignment, but that would involve some cross-cutting issue that people in both parties share positions on. And I don't see the Tea Party as being able to facilitate that. Most of the movements, really until the Christian right, were liberal. So the Tea Party's had the most grassroots support of any conservative movement. I think you could see this again if you got a certain group on the left. I think the other thing that the Tea Party's introduced that has changed things is the ability of social media to create a movement very quickly.
One of the hallmarks of the Tea Party is their effectiveness on social media. Perhaps the most clear example is the difference between the number of likes on Ted Cruz's Facebook page, which amounts to a whopping 1,711,374 likes, compared with the relatively small 145,307 likes on fellow Republican Lindsey Graham's Facebook page. The difference? Ted Cruz is recognized as a Tea Party politician, while Graham is most commonly referred to as an establishment politician.
Because in the U.S., we tend to talk about political organization in three ways. We call it's either a party, a movement, or an interest group. And the Tea Party has had parts of all of these, right? Americans for Prosperity is an interest group, but it is not the Tea Party, it's just one part of it. The early phases were a movement, but clearly they do political things, but they aren't an official party. So I'm trying to say that there have long been movements like the Tea Party that wanted all the things the party wants. They want to get people in office, they want to change policy, and in the U.S. they've never had a way to do it, and the Tea Party's introduced a new way, which is working through a party to co-opt its existing apparatuses, like make that the host organism. The Tea Party's it sounds bad, parasite?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, yeah.
Like use their electoral mechanisms to get their own people in.
I certainly feel like I learned a lot. How about you?
I learned so much and was so happy to be able to do this project. I think that throughout this project, as I explored the positive effects of the Tea Party on the Republican Party and grassroots as a whole, I think that the benefits are clear as demonstrated by a recent Gallup poll, which took a sample and found that 74% of the Americans thought that the Tea Party was re-energizing voters, and 56% thought that Tea Party was making candidates more relatable to them as a voter. And
certainly adds fire.
I think so. And I think with someone like our age, like who's younger, we like, candidates that, are kind of have high energy and, seem like good people that we kind of can like feel connected. So, and I think the Tea Party with the anti-Washington sentiment is also able to use that because people are sick of Washington and not being able to get anything done. You can't get anything done for years or just, everything's disagreed upon. So I think the Tea Party has been very effective in doing those certain things, which is why it is, since 2009, it's had a big impact. It will continue to have an impact in the future, and possibly even this presidential election, if we see a Tea Party candidate elected, whether it's Ted Cruz, or Carson and Trump, who both have a lot of Tea Party supporting them. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, and I think the positive effects of it have been great. So.
Yes, I certainly agree with you that the Tea Party is definitely a large part of our political landscape today. But I will temper what you said in the fact that, to be honest, as Rachel pointed out to us, I don't think it's possible for the Tea Party to form a third political party in America because, unlike parliamentary systems of France or Great Britain, the election system in the United States is unique in that it has single-member districts and first-past-the-post elections. So it just makes a very large hurdle in terms of actually having a third party that is able to contend and compete with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, both established parties.
Yep.
However, that's not to say that the Tea Party is going anywhere, and grassroots movements, are not going anywhere either. In fact, we discussed with Rachel a scenario in which a leftist grassroots movements could arise in it relatively soon.
And we saw that in 2012 with Mitt Romney, who was the establishment candidate. He got put out there and lost to Obama, and much of the Republican Party thought we need to put a more conservative candidate out there. And that's kind of where the Tea Party started to gain a lot of fire because it was kind of the same old with McCain. Romney lost. And then maybe in this election we're going to have someone out there that is more Tea Party-like. So we could see that in 2016 if Hillary Clinton's put out there. She's a more moderate one that panders to both sides. And the Bernie Sanders was like, all right, if she's the one that's moderate and is going to win, then we'll put her out there. But if she loses to someone that's very conservative, you could see that same...
That could rile up the Bernie Sanders supporters and essentially have a similar effect on the Democratic Party, in which a group of dissenters who are dissatisfied with the new Republican president, due to Hillary's loss, would form their own grassroots group that could serve as a rival to the Tea Party and actually polarize our political landscape even more.
So I think we've come to the conclusion that grassroots movements are
Not a temporary.
no, they're here. Yeah, they're here
Yes.
to stay. So
They are a permanent part of our political landscape
that
now.
about wraps it up.
We'd like to thank several people for making this video possible. Of course, Professor Rome and our TA Mark Hines, who were both very instructive, very educational. And Mark was very supportive of our project. He put us in touch with Rachel. We'd also like to thank Rachel, who took the time out of her schedule to interview with us.
Yep.
And
And I'd like to thank Colonel Alan West, who was kind enough to do an interview with me and let me ask him all the questions I need to ask him and bother him in his busy schedule. So it was awesome. And we really had fun doing it.
alrighty, from Live at Loud, this is Sam,
And this is Chris.
signing off.